Hey, how are you doing, everybody? It's Luke Cobalt here, and so I was going to talk about some kind of things around my mind. Obviously, really focusing on politics right now. We just had the elections, New Jersey and Virginia. Virginia had a big win for Ken Young for the Republicans. That was a big win for him. I'm actually up in here in the Northern Virginia area, and everybody comes and asks me, "Hey, what do you think about this election? Who do you think is going to win?" and stuff like that. I'm back home, back from where I'm from, and I kept on telling everybody, I said, "Well, I'm living up here in Northern Virginia. I remember back in 2016 or correction 2020, how many Trump signs I would see up here compared to how many Biden signs, and then going in here to this election in 2021, just a huge difference. Seeing how many Youngkin signs were out, like Youngkin, Latinos for Youngkin, different groups for just Youngkin. You just wouldn't see that before with Trump up here in Northern Virginia. So I said, man, if you could just, get high 30% up here in Northern Virginia, it's really going to carry him over through the election. I was also up in New Jersey about 3 weeks ago, just doing some camp up there. I traveled out throughout the majority of the state. I'd say about 2/3 of it, and I just saw so many, Jack signs. This county for Jack, and he came really close to beating the incumbent and Murphy. So I was talking to a few people up there, and you look at that election up there, and you see that a lot of times that they vote Democrat mostly in that state, but it seems like after every 4 years, they get tired of that Democrat, that person, that individual Democrat's policy, and then slide back to a Republican way. As you can see, that this was the first time that a Democrat's been elected governor twice in a row, so that was huge. But it's still a big win for the Democrats up there. But it was a huge win when it came down to the margin of victory for the Republicans up there. So that was huge. I look at a lot of different things, and I think that I travel to the United States all the time, and we think that there's a huge divide between Democrats and Republicans, and we feel like, especially out east and out west, you feel like that the Democrats represent you if you're the working poor, stuff like that, the middle class and stuff like that, or educated. And then you go in the Midwest and the South, and they kind of feel like no matter if you're rich or poor, whatever, the Republicans kind of, if you're especially out in rural areas, that the Republicans really care about you. And when I kind of come up here and see over things, it just kind of seems that neither party really cares about the middle class or the poor working class. I would say the lower working class. I feel like a lot of people are really caring about the lower class that may not work or doesn't really add anything into society, whereas like a tax base, I think there's a lot of people that care for them. And then for the uber rich, I mean, I just look at the current new policy that was just passed with this new infrastructure plan and stuff like that. I guess you could call it infrastructure, whatever you want to call it. And it favors, lack of better words, it favors really poor people, favors really rich people. It doesn't really favor the middle class. It doesn't. It's not going to grow the middle class. It's not going to grow those that are working hard every day. And I think that everyday people that are really working hard and really going after things, I think that they're not so much into politics because they're busy with everyday life. I talk to people and say, life's hard. It's money's tight and stuff like that. And I think that when certain people, certain people defend Biden and say, hey, he just, I guess you're not grateful for the $2,000 that I guess you already spent it, so you don't really care about it anymore. But they really think, hey, well, give someone $2,000 and then over for a year and a half, oh, well, that should be good. You're good to go. And I'm like, no, like we all know that, hey, $2,000 is really nice to have. Yes, it can really help out with some things, but it doesn't matter if you live in the Midwest or the Northeast or the out West. $2,000 doesn't really go far. I mean, yes, it's really going to help out with 1 month's rent and some groceries and stuff like that. And some essentials, but it's not going to go long term. It's not going to really change your life and set it to a new trajectory and stuff like that. So I think there's a huge disconnect between DC politics and politicians and leaders that think that, hey, we can throw you some crumbs, and then you're not grateful. Like, oh, well, Biden's not popular anymore. You're like, why is that? And we'll give you $2,000, and you're like, there's a huge disconnect. And like when we look at gas prices in California, I'm originally from California, and it's a huge state. So a lot of times when people say, well, hey, gas prices in Los Angeles are 605 or something like that. I just read in one article. It doesn't mean like it's all overstate, but really it's huge. Like even up north in the in the rural areas, you're still looking at gas in 460, 480, 490 a gallon. And I was back there back in August, and I was just saying, can you afford to drive here or have a vehicle if you don't really make really good money? Like I don't see how you could own a truck or an SUV and make 50, 60,000 a year and be able to afford a house, afford groceries, and afford to be able to drive. And so when you look at all these additional taxes that they have on California fuel, you have an additional about $1.80 a gallon that goes right there for just taxes of state taxes on gas per gallon. And then you look at additional gas taxes for low carbon and then refinery techniques to make it more green or less environmental impact. And then, they're passing it on to consumers. And what does this really hurt? It doesn't really hurt the person that lives in Los Angeles, that lives in downtown, that, is taking, just Ubering around and is taking some kind of light rail or something like that, or the person that lives in the Bay Area or, on the coastal areas. It doesn't really affect them because you don't really drive much, but it affects those person that lives in, say, the valley or out east of Los Angeles and has to commute into the city to do tasks or do jobs that really don't pay that much, maybe, $50, $60, $70,000 a year. And yeah, over a lot of places in the country, $50, $60, $70,000 is really good. But, if you're saying, hey, your house is, $300,000 to buy plus, and then, you're going to pay, if you have a truck, $150 to fill it up, and you're going to be filling it up, $150 about every week, and then, it's $600 a month in fuel. And then it just adds up and adds up, talking about how they're going to, change ways that, how bacon is going to become more expensive for California because they're changing the techniques of like how you can raise pork products and be sold in the state of California. And it's just dumb stuff. It's just one thing after another that it seems like that all these things with good intentions and good ideas really are great in a lot of ways. But when it comes down to it, it just harms the lower middle class in the working lower class, not upper lower class. That's all it harms. Like these policies and these fancy ideas do not affect upper middle class, the super poor that don't work and are just getting by with government subsidies, unemployment benefits, and stuff like that, or the super rich. And so it is just it's so just you just look at these people that are really working their butts off, working 8, 10, 12, 14-hour days, and then commuting, 2-3 hours each way in traffic. And then these things affect them. Heating costs affect them. Electric rates affect them. Everything keeps on affecting them because the government's not going to give them a handout. The government's not going to make it any easier on them. And so it's huge for them. And so I think that it's time for that we as a people look at politicians and say, it's not about like what you're going to do for, because they always don't talk in platitudes. It's always like, hey, I'm going to change the world. We're going to save the whales and we're going to clear all the carbon dioxide in the air and vote for me. We're going to make change. But then those are great. Those are, good things to go for. I'm not saying like saving, dolphins is a bad thing. But when it's saving a dolphin at the cost of harming millions, it makes no sense. Like we it seems like as Americans we export this policy that we got this good idea, and then we go over to other countries and saying like, hey, you can't do this anymore, and they're like, well, this is how we get by. This is how we make a job. This is how we make a living. And we're like, oh, well, you could do this, and they're like, hey, we don't know how to do that, or our economy's not set up that way, or nothing's set up that way. It doesn't matter. We're just gonna freaking move around with our money and make these people, your government do these things because we're pretty much paying to do it. And it's kind of like we do that even in our local areas in many states where these policies may be good for, say, Ventura in California, where it doesn't get super hot or super cold, or in the Bay Area. And then, too, when you're saying, like, hey, we can raise these additional tax on utilities and stuff like that, it's going to be a good thing because we're going to use it to, lower the carbon and whatever this on that. And you're like, oh, that's great because it doesn't affect you because you guys don't ever turn on your air conditioner, don't ever turn on your heater. But then the people in this, San Joaquin Valley, Sacramento Valley, or out there in the God forbid desert, you know, they have to turn on the heater in the winter constantly. They have to turn on their air conditioners in the summer constantly. And so these high electric rates and these bills really affect them. And it's that those are the middle class and the lower middle class and the upper lower class people that's really affecting. And we have nothing that we give them. And every now and then we're like, oh, we'll give you a subsidy, $1,000. Or we're like, hey, don't worry, we'll give you a child, tax credit of $1,000. And you're like, it's just so disconnected, like so ingenuine. And like I look at politics around here, and so many times, even where I'm from, I was on like a telephone town hall with one of my senators, and it was an hour long. It was really cool that they did it. I'm not taking any away from that, but then you could ask questions and you like hit this star or something or other, get in this queue, ask a question, and come back right into the call. And then if they get to you, they get to you. And then once right when an hour hit, he's like, well, guys, I said this is gonna be an hour, so I gotta respect that. And you're like, what do you mean you gotta respect? It's like freaking Tuesday night, where you ain't doing nothing because we're like sitting around on your thumbs, And so it's like you guys can't like go a little bit longer or whatever. Apparently, it's not a Baptist church or something. And so it's like you come off acting like you really care. You brought forth, talking about like, hey, what do we think about the southern border? What do we think about inflation? What do you think about these spending bills? What would be the one that already passed, the infrastructure, bipartisan infrastructure, or this reconciliation bill and stuff like that? And he's trying to get like a pulse on his constituents that are on these, that he had their phone numbers and email addresses. And that's cool, but he make it sound like he was really going out his way to, hey, it's like, I got to inform you guys. I really want to know what you're talking about and stuff like that. But it was like almost like, hey, some strategist told him, hey, maybe if you talk to your local residents and, just for an hour, they're going to act like, you really care. And it's really to help out your reelection chances more than anything. So I did have to respect that, even when people did kind of disagree with him or said like, hey, why don't you support X? That I support the Biden's plan. He had a decent argument against it or whatever, and he was very respectful. So that was cool. But anyway, so at the end of it, also I did ask a question. Obviously they didn't come to me. So they said, hey, don't worry, we'll call you over this next week, and we'll get back to you on your question and whatever. And I was like, oh, sweet. So I left this voicemail. Yeah, they never called me. That was like 4 weeks ago. But so that just kind of seemed really ingenuine. Like, don't even say you're gonna do it. Just be like, hey, I'm gonna talk to you guys for an hour. And that's it. They ain't gonna call you back. None of my staff are gonna call you back. So whatever. But so I think it's kind of funny how politicians we vote in, a lot of times we think that they like us. And Teddy Roosevelt said that was a key thing. He says it's not about people liking the person they're electing. It's that the person that they're electing needs to give off the sense that that they like those that are voting for them. And this idea that like he likes me or she likes me, when in reality they don't know your name and they pretty much don't really care. Like 90% of them. So no hate, but I just haven't really seen a lot of genuine politicians that really, really care about their constituents, and more than a, hey, let's get some pictures here. I remember once I was overseas, and one of these politicians was with us, and they were like, hey, these dogs here really remind me of my dog back home. And we're like, oh, that's really cool. That's awesome. And it was like 40 minutes later, and then that person was like, yeah, man, it's unbelievable how much these dogs look like mine. We're like, oh, that's great. Anyways, this person takes a picture of the dogs, And then it was like, 30 minutes later, it's like, man, see, you got to check this out. See, I got to show you a picture of my dog back home, and I'll show you how much it looks like this dog. And you're like, okay, let me see see your dog. And then he like shows the picture, and he's like, see, or the person says, see, looks just like my dog. And I'm thinking, that was the picture you just took of the dogs here, not your dog back home. And so I was like, well, really, that's uncandid how even the grass looks the same. And they were just like, yeah, it's just crazy. It reminds me of home. And then I'm thinking, this person is in the US government as a pretty high official that just showed me a picture the person just took and claimed it was an old picture that they took of their dog back home. And you're just like, all right. So it's just dumb stuff like that. You just go on and on. And so I think the key thing that people, when you're voting for people, and you got to know your candidates, you got to be educated. So I think that everybody's always like, get out the vote, just get out there and vote. Just put the pen to the paper. But the key thing is I would have all these, public announcements saying, be educated, get educated, and based off of your education, then go vote. Because if you don't know who you're talking about or who's on this ballot or what the measures are, I don't want you to vote because it's like you don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I don't care if you even like my candidate. Like a lot of times people are like, you're in a Republican area and they're like, oh, you got to get out there. They're like, would you support Donald Trump? And if you're like, oh, no, maybe, then they're like, oh, you got to go out there, you're going to vote. And you're just like, maybe you should tell me, hey, be educated. Look into these candidates and look into the policies and ideas that they're putting forth that they were going to want to do for the next 4, 6, 8 years. That's going to put the nation on a course. And then see if you agree with that. And if you agree with that, vote for that candidate. So it's all about, it's not just about getting people out to vote, but there should be more push to get people educated enough to that when they vote for a candidate, they believe in that candidate, not just because of semantics or the way someone looks or how someone talks. Because, I voted for Obama like twice. You know why? He's a very good talker. Heck yeah. And that's not smart. And then I was like, and someone told me, it's like, well, it's like, so if anybody's smart and talking, you can just get up there and vote for them. I was like, awesome. Probably should get educated on vote. And so then I did. And so everybody was like, oh, who'd you vote for in 2016? And I was like, well, Gary Johnson, because, I'm a libertarian. And but I looked at Gary Johnson. I actually liked a lot of things. Now I get it. He didn't know where Aleppo was or pretty much any city in Syria. And, pretty much thought it was like I think they thought it was like in Greece or something. But it was pretty bad. So he didn't apparently own a globe. But the idea of Gary Johnson is that he was a Republican governor in New Mexico for 2 terms with Democratic House and Senate and got stuff done for the state of New Mexico and brought the state forward. And that was huge. And then also his vice president candidate was Bill Weld from like New Hampshire. Yeah, it was New Hampshire. But he was also another, 2-term Republican governor, worked with the Democratic Senate and House and got stuff done. And so I was saying, well, these are people that have shown through multiple levels of government to work across aisles, to figure out differences and figure out when to flex and when to give and go forward. And then you looked at Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and you're saying, well, these are 2 people that epitomize the opposite of both what I just said. And so that's why I went for Gary Johnson. So it's ever just because you're a libertarian. I said, no, it's because I believed in his principles, I believed in his ideas, and I looked at his track record of how he did business in New Mexico and looked at Bill Weld's track record, and I agreed with it. Now, I agreed that they weren't the smartest candidate when it comes down to international relations and affairs at that current moment with ISIS and Al-Qaeda at that time, but neither was Trump or heck, Clinton, and she should be a lot better because she's Secretary of State. She was in the government for a million years. Her husband was president. So I don't know. Whatever, So I think that if we, push more education, say like, yes, get out there and vote, but get out there and be educated and look, and not just say like, hey, look at this one website, and they'll tell you how to vote or what they think, but look into things and look at people. Because when like in 2020, people say, well, you're going to vote for. And so actually, I didn't vote in 2020. I was lazy. One of those. Doing something that day. Right? I was a pretty busy guy. Okay. And but when it came down to it, I didn't like either candidate. And so I think that if you don't agree with either one, why would you vote for either one? But everybody's like, oh, you got to vote. I was like, well, if you're going to vote for, a shit sandwich in a plastic bag or shit sandwich in a paper bag, either way, you're getting the same thing because one's more preserved, I guess. I guess less people will know what you have because you can't smell through the plastic, I guess. So I think that's kind of the key thing. And, um, you know, I think that Youngkin will be good for kind of going back to the original thing. I think Youngkin will be good for Virginia. I think that Virginia needs to kind of slide back to the right a little bit. I don't think Youngkin is hardcore right, lean like he's gonna, bring us back to Reagan or anything here. But I think that he does have some ideas, and he does have a burning desire to be good for the state of Virginia. I think that's key because I think that McAuliffe was kind of like he's retread at that time. He's already been governor, previously. I think he was just doing it because it's kind of in his blood to be a politician. It's like, hey, I'm on this horse. I got to ride to retirement and figure out a way to do it. And I think Youngkin's kind of come in, be a little fresh. I think the lieutenant governor Winston Sears, I think that she has a lot of capabilities too. I think that she has that burn desire for the people of Virginia and to make the Commonwealth, a little bit better place each and every day and focus on some key things. So I think that'd be good for Virginia. But yeah, you look at, the recall in California. That was a show. I don't know. I didn't think anybody think that Larry Elder was going to win or nothing. But I think it was key thing is keep California to keep Gavin Newsom kind of honest and says, look, if you keep on acting the fool, we're going to hold you accountable for it. And I think that was kind of key. It's not the idea of saying like, oh, that Elder is going to win or anything, but that but there's enough here in California opposition to keep you honest. And because you can see right after that happened, boom, right in the assembly, what California's trying to do, start trying to make it harder to do a recall election and ask their statewide recall election because they're like, oh, the vote level's too low, we got to bring it up or something. And I think anytime that one party does these things that make it change because it was affecting them earlier, anytime they do that, it can always backfire back against them. Let's say if the Republicans take, take the governorship and then they're trying to recall, but then you change the recall rules to make it tougher, and then now it backfires on you. So I think these key things, especially that if you look in the House right now, in the National House, don't get rid of certain protections just because it's expedient for you at that time or politically expedient for you at that current time because it will backfire because you look at the United States, everybody's always like, oh, America is this whole pole and divide us. Yeah, but it just keeps on swinging to the left and it swings back to the right. It's constant ebbs and flows, look at Reagan, Clinton, Neil Bush, and then Obama, Trump, and then going right to Joe Biden. So you look at those things and I think we're getting these constant swings. It's just kind of the way it is. I think America is a great country. I don't think it's as crazy or as bad as a lot of people put it. I think that it's just easier because we have these media just like right now when you're watching, you're on YouTube, social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I kind of like Instagram if you just have pictures. It doesn't seem too political, but every now and then, Breitbart News has put a lot of stuff on there. No hate on you, but it's the same. Seems like you guys have to politicize something. And so I think that you look at America and you can just see it so much more that there's some differences between people. Wow, there's differences between people that live in urban areas and the rural. No way. The rural urban divide has never been any bigger. And you're like, okay, yeah. Let's go back to like the 1950s in downtown New York and the 1950s West Virginia, and then be like, they're so much alike, like each other, and then like do it now and be like, ah, they're so much different. No, they're not. It's not. It's just that you can see it because it's broadcasted. It's like same thing. I feel like I remember like in the late '80s, the CIA was like, "Oh man, Russia's not gonna fall. Economy's too powerful, and it's just going in the right direction for them." And it'd be like 10 years they're taking over, and then it was like a year later they fell because you got to kind of protect your entrances. You kind of have to blow up something to make it sound like, "Oh crap, man, I'm giving you that more money because all bad guys are here." So a lot of times when I read these news stories about like China and stuff like that, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you obviously want them to be seen as a huge threat because right now we're talking about our budget, talking about DoD, and so we do those things. I mean, everybody does it. Same thing with like climate people. It's funny because like climate, I watch a lot of debates over climate. Some of the brightest minds on all the different ideas of it, and it's really funny because every time I watch like a debate that's put on like by a major university, it'll be a guy from like MIT, guy from this college up in British Columbia, and they're all arguing out. And they're just like, I agree with you. I agree with you. And I'm like, what do these guys wait, the title, like what? Like, they're supposed to disagree majorly, and all they disagreed on was like one thing was radiative forcings. And then most people don't even ever heard of radiative forcings, and it's like the thermostat that controls the reaction of the Earth to inputs that change climate. That's about it. And one was like, it's fast reacting. That means radiative forcing is quick. That means as soon as there's an input, or there's an automatic reaction to it that neutralizes it, blah, blah. And the other one's like, no, it's really slow. So you're seeing it, but they actually haven't seen the long term effects because it's going to be down the road. So that was like the only thing I disagreed on. I'm like, oh my gosh, I spent years doing this, and it's like, that's all I can find. But yet, when you watch like the news articles and stuff like that, it's like bending doom, New York City's gonna go underwater, and then it's like, oh, these guys are saying this stuff. You're like, no, they're not. Like, that's what your article states, and then you're like, well, see, we're sourcing something, another article, not like an actual paper of any sort. So, anyways, that's my take. Thanks for going football, Steve. With football. Have a good night.